Welcome back. So today we're going to do something a little more fun, and it's the end of the year and the holiday season. So we're going to talk about some fun sets, and these are one current released and two upcoming sets from SOUNDPEATS. This is essentially their current and TWS lineup for the next month or two. So starting over here on the left, this is the Mini Pro HS. This is the Capsule3 Pro, and this is the upcoming Opera05. So the Opera05 is a bit of a special one, and I'll probably do a separate video on that one. But these two are actually very similar. They just kind of cover two different types of users. But so going back to my previous SOUNDPEATS TWS review, that was the Air 3 Deluxe HS. So the HS, Air 3 Deluxe HS, was the first set with LDAC. So high-res wireless audio, LDAC, Android users. It is the best wireless audio you can get over Bluetooth, so it is very special, and it's very special at the price point that Air 3 Deluxe HS hit. The issue with Air 3 Deluxe HS was that it was half in-ear style, so it was like the old AirPod half-in style, so you were essentially putting a high-res audio codec into a design that wasn't really optimal for high-res audio. So that was my nitpick on it. Second nitpick was it didn't have the active noise cancellation and transparency modes that some of the other SOUNDPEATS sets had at the time. So with that, I had mentioned that to SOUNDPEATS, and they just said wait, and that was very true. So this is going to be the first one that was released that sort of addressed those issues. So this is the Mini Pro HS, and it is a tiny guy. But it is sort of a traditional TWS or even IEM style shell in-ear model. Fits in your mod. It's very lightweight. This is kind of exactly what I was looking for. In-ear model. You can actually hear all of the wireless audio from LDAC. There was nothing really missing from bad fit. This is, they pretty much addressed the issue. So you get the LDAC high-res audio, in-ear model, active noise cancellation, transparency mode. This is sort of the whole package, and they did it with a 10mm dynamic driver. So the one that's coming out in February is sort of the higher, or the more in-ear version of the Air 3 Deluxe HS, right? So this is sort of the in-ear version of that. So instead of half in-ear, this is the full in-ear version for people who like this style. So I would say these two, spec-wise, are actually very similar. The real sound difference is how this one sits in your ear versus how that one sits in your ear. So kind of interesting that they released those two almost simultaneously, but they really addressed people. This is more for people who are used to a traditional TWS or even a traditional IEM, something that's going to sit in your ear. This is sort of for people who are going to use it or used to a style that is sort of half out ear, but still get the benefits of high-res audio with the in-ear nozzle. And this is Opera05, and this is sort of the big daddy for audiophiles, and this is very much a big daddy looking shell. So if we look at it next to the Mini Pro, and the Mini Pro of course is mini, but you can kind of see that this is a 10mm dynamic driver. This is the 12mm dynamic driver with two balanced armatures. So Opera05, very special set, very much designed for audiophiles. It's sort of the big daddy of the range for people who are strictly into sound. The Mini Pro HS, people who are looking for convenience, great sound. You get 6 mics for noise cancellation. So this is sort of your all-arounder, a great thing to carry around. People who are really into audio and want to get the max out of LDAC and are very used to critical listening, you're probably going to head towards Opera05. And again, I'll probably talk about Opera05 in its own video, because that is a special set. So that's the overview of all three of those models. So let's kind of make sure I covered everything. So building on top of LDAC from Air 3 Deluxe HS, like I said, LDAC plus ANC transparency mode on all three of these guys, and in-ear design on all three of these guys. So these are now sort of the complete package that was sort of a bit missing on Air 3 Deluxe. So Mini Pro HS, 10mm dynamic driver, 4 dB of ANC and a transparency mode, 6 mics and wind resistant mic placement, which is actually kind of nice. 7.5 hours of playback on SBC codec. You get about a little less, a couple hours less on full LDAC, and I think an hour less on ANC. And I think that basically goes through all three of these. You sort of get the 7 or 6 hours, and then an hour or two less on LDAC. So Capsule3, which was the one that was the kind of drop-down lollipop design, that has a bigger driver, so a 12mm dynamic driver. You get a little bit more ANC, active noise cancellation, transparency, same 6 mics, and a little bit less of playtime, and a little bit less playtime on LDAC. So Opera05, the Big Daddy, this is the audiophile model. And it is very nice. It is weighty and big and very, very nice. It's kind of a luxury version of these two, and certainly nothing wrong with these two. These are definitely more traditional. This one sort of looks like the price point, and this one will be launched on Kickstarter, so I'll put a link to the info as we have it today. But like I said, the audiophile model, 12mm dynamic driver, 2 balanced armatures, 30 dB of ANC, so a little bit less active noise cancellation, still has transparency mode. And the noise cancellation during calls actually changed. They call it dual ENC. So there is a slight difference and I would call this primarily a music listening device, and these are more for general purpose, listening to music, taking calls, doing what you need to do, whereas this one is very much leaning towards people who are heavily into music. You get a bit more playtime on SBC and LDAC. So that's the overview of all three of those guys, and kind of the general things about these. All of them all have app support through the same application. That app gives you EQ, their EQ modes. Their top one is called SOUNDPEATS Classic Mode, and then they have, I think, 6 other variations on their mode. But the main one that ships by default is SOUNDPEATS Classic Mode, and we'll look at that in 1 second. And additionally, you get custom EQ for further tweaking if that doesn't really work for you. So LDAC 90, if you want to use the highest bitrate on LDAC on a streaming service like Spotify or Tidal, very much you need a lot of bandwidth. You need either a very high speed Wi-Fi connection or very close to your router. It actually takes quite a bit of bandwidth to stream that down and then LDAC over to the set. I just noticed that on my weaker Wi-Fi connections it will kind of cut out, but on a stronger connection, a little closer to your router, it is very much solid and sounds great. I would say it's worth it if you can manage that much bandwidth. Sound, I think I would call their house sound bass boosted clarity, and this is really what it looks like up close. Sort of. Let's see if we could get that flat. So bass boosted, they have this very interesting bass curve, which looks kind of familiar for those of you who are into the current 2 dynamic driver sets and wired world. This is what they do. They do it in a crossover. SOUNDPEATS does it in a DSP. So you get this kind of heavy bass curve that drops down to the floor at 200 hertz. So it's almost a detached subwoofer type sound. You get a big bass, very rich bass sound that doesn't really bleed into your mids at all. And then you end up with a lot of clarity. And then depending on the design of the set, they kind of bump it or dip it. So Mini Pro HS, the one that goes in ear, which you're probably going to hear the most amount of bass because it's sitting in your ear, the best seal, they bump up that for just a little more clarity. Capsule3 Pro, the one that sits kind of hanging down from your ear, not as good of a seal, so you're probably not going to be hearing as much bass as this shows. They drop the gain down a little bit to compensate for not having to adjust for that, and I think that was kind of a wise choice. So Opera 3 is the one, or Opera 5 I mean, same bass boost, same lots of bass, same clarity in the mids, great detail, and they actually bump up the upper treble, assuming you want to hear those two balanced armatures. So Opera05, like I said, is the one I'll take a closer look at because we'll have to see how this all worked out. And again, the app gives you a custom EQ, so you can actually bump that down if that's a bit too much. But at first listen, it wasn't. I think they were just showcasing the two balanced armatures there. So I don't think that was going to be an issue. But that's the gist of this. Is sort of the SOUNDPEATS classic sound signature, and they basically just tweak it for the design or the driver. And I think that's just a very slick way to put out lots of models with a similar sound signature. So whether you buy this one, or this one, you sort of know what you're getting, and then you can base your choice based on budget and which features you really need. So quite smart, but we'll go through the sound real quick. So like I said, 20 to 180 hertz, bass boosted, a nice bump there, and then for a nice fun sound, and then it drops to the floor for clarity in the mids. The effect is that mid separated from the bass rather than bleeding in. It's sort of a subwoofer effect. Capsule3 Pro sounds a bit lighter in bass, probably just due to the design and how it sat in my ear. The mids, clean with some warmth, not as cold as I expected. The way you drop, if you don't have any bass bleeding into your mids, it can tend to sound a little colder, a little sharper. The way this one sits on top of the bass, I think it actually all works out quite well. And it's their house sound, so I think they've been refining it for quite a bit. Mini Pro HS rises a little higher in the upper mid, like I said, just reinforcing that clarity and detail and contrast to the stronger bass that you're probably going to hear with that in-ear design. Capsule3 Pro is a bit lighter in the upper mid, as the bass is lighter, less compensation needed. Treble, the boost and extension is the house sound signature. Not bright per se, but elevated as to have the full range against that strong bass presence. Not airy or not as airy on SBC. I think LDAC is a little more airy. I think when you talk about Bluetooth compression and band rate and bit rate, I think LDAC just tends to do that a little better, especially for those of you who care about that last 1%. So that's pretty much what I got on all three of those. And like I said, I will really focus on Opera05. That is the upcoming one in about, I think, 2 weeks. This one actually gets launched on Kickstarter. Again, for IEM people, this is the special audiophile one. Big dynamic driver, two balanced armatures, LDAC, so very special. So I think that one deserves a little more time on its own. Whereas these two are fine sets, but really just a difference of convenience, small in-ear versus the hang-down, bigger in-ear, more convenient for people who are not used to in-ear placement. So that is what I got on SOUNDPEATS current and near future set. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.